Their behavior is information. If you're telling yourself something like that, their behavior is information, something's not working for them, then you're going to remember that your job isn't to fix them, but to understand them. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. So happy to be talking to you today. I know you know this, but my obsession with parenting is one of the most fun and totally unexpected things. Actually, that's not true. I mean, I love parenting. I always knew I wanted to be a parent, but I did not think in a million years I would be having a podcast on parenting, writing a book on parenting. It's just so wild. So I just finished the reboot. Did you guys hear about the reboot? It was so fun. And going through for myself the last 90 days and reviewing all of the things that had happened, so much happened. I did not even get back to the States until the beginning of March. And so the first 2 months of the year, I was in New Zealand, which was a trip to remember that. It feels like I just got back in, like that was a million years ago. It was so fun. I had a son come home from Chile, and I've gone to Arizona to see my parents. I mean, just so many beautiful things have happened. My youngest got a job, which is so crazy, and she went to prom. So this last 90 days has been awesome. So awesome. And the weather is changing here. So we're up in the mountains. We moved from Phoenix up to the mountains a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love the seasons. I love the change of weather from winter to spring, and we're starting to get into spring, and it's so fun. The trees are blooming. I call them popcorn trees because in Arizona and Phoenix, well, I should say specifically Phoenix, because this is not the case for the northern part of Arizona, which I don't know if you knew this, but Arizona has 2 ski resorts. So there are parts of Arizona that are different than the desert, but in the desert where I lived, we didn't have the trees blooming the way we have them here. And it's just so fun. So that is where I am at today. And I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today, which is what should I tolerate? It seems really appropriate to be talking about it on the tail end of winter, because the conversation for a lot of us have been lately, oh my gosh, when is winter going to be over? Can I tolerate one more snowstorm? And I can't complain because we really missed the majority of winter this year. And I do love winter too. So it was like bittersweet missing it. I did enjoy the warmth in New Zealand while winter was here, but I got enough of winter because where we are tends to transition to spring late. So I got a good month of winter, and a lot of the people who are around us, our neighbors, were talking about just being so ready, my kids' friends being so ready for winter to be over. And so this idea of what can I tolerate? Can I tolerate another storm has been on my mind. And I'm going to talk about it specifically in what should I tolerate in my relationships. It comes up so frequently when I'm working with parents, especially when they first come to me. It doesn't happen once they've worked with me for a little while because things start to shift so quickly. But when someone first comes to me and they are feeling frustrated about the behavior that their children are having, they're not satisfied with the relationship they have with their child, this question comes up because there's this conundrum they're in. I don't want to be too passive. I don't want to let my children walk all over me, and I don't want them to not have any rules or boundaries. That's not good. We know that intuitively, that's not good. But I don't want to be so authoritative that they rebel or that I'm overstepping my bounds. And so there's this conundrum between what should I allow my children to do? Should I allow this behavior? Am I being too passive? Am I being too controlling? And a wondering of what should I do when my child is pushing boundaries? Because our kids are going to push boundaries. They're going to talk back. They're going to refuse to listen. And so these questions are going to come up. So today we're exploring this question deeply. I think you're going to find that the answer isn't as straightforward as tolerate this and don't tolerate that. Instead, it's going to be a little more nuanced. It's going to be about understanding some of the deeper dynamics at play in our relationships, in our kids' behavior, in what's developmentally appropriate, and how do we make a decision from that place of connection rather than correction to decide, what am I going to tolerate? So as we talk about what to tolerate in our relationships today, I want you to do two things. I want you to give yourself a lot of grace and space, permission to be imperfect. Give that towards yourself and towards your kids. I really believe that we're all doing the best we can. Now, does that mean we're doing great? Not necessarily. Some days we are severely limited, but we're all doing the best we can. And if we can remember that, then we can learn and do better next time. So I want to start by sharing a story that happened with one of my clients. She had a 10-year-old son who, in her words, had become increasingly defiant. And for her, it brought up this question of, what should I tolerate? Like, what do you tolerate when your child refuses to clean their room, when they talk back, when they have a meltdown, when they're just feeling contrary, or they feel like they go contrary to everything that you are asking. They have the meltdown in the grocery store, they roll their eyes. And so the questions I think that most of us have when the behavior happens, when this kind of behavior happens, is, can I tolerate this? What boundaries should I set? How do I maintain connection while still being the parent? And for so many of us, which makes 100% sense, this is where we get stuck. We get stuck in indecision. Sometimes we can just freeze, not knowing which one to do, but we can also get stuck between two extremes. So on one end, we have the permissiveness. We might be overly permissive, afraid to set boundaries. Maybe we're nervous that we're going to damage the relationship. We don't want them to be upset. Maybe we are uncomfortable with the emotions that will come out if they don't get what they want. Or maybe we didn't like how strict our parents were, and so we don't want to be like them. We've made this commitment. I will not be like that. And so we tend to live in the camp of permissiveness, of giving in. So that's one extreme. And then on the other end of the extreme is the over-controlling, the setting rigid boundaries, pushing those boundaries with no deviation. We think, hey, if I don't crack down on this behavior right now, it's going to get worse. It's going to be a runaway train. I need to show them who's boss. I need to set the limit now. I can't let them get away with it. And for any of you who have bounced between those two extremes, which I have, they aren't satisfying. Neither camp feels good because they don't work on, by one alone doesn't work. And neither approach serves our kids or the relationship. It doesn't serve their nervous system. It doesn't help them feel safe. It doesn't help them relax. It doesn't allow them to depend on us, because in either case, for the most part, if you're in the land of permissiveness or the land of authoritativeness, typically you're there for the same reason. You're nervous about what will happen. And so you're trying to solve it by either not setting any boundaries so you don't have any fallout, you don't have any pushback, or laying down firm so they learn their lesson. Both are coming from a sense of lack, of a little bit of fear and uncertainty. And that's not what our kids need. Our kids need us to be a compassionate alpha. They need to know they can depend on us. They need us to be bigger than the behavior or the emotion that they're having. And they really do need us to provide the consistent stability and stay in the position of a compassionate alpha so they can relax, so their nervous system can process emotions, they can feel safe, they can fulfill their potential. And this middle way is the compassionate alpha. So this is where we can set the clear boundary while maintaining a strong connection. So we do it in a compassionate yet firm way. This approach recognizes that the child needs both structure and love, both limits and acceptance, which makes sense. Intuitively, we know that's what we want to. And I want you to think about it like this. Think about a river. A river needs both banks for it to flow properly. Without the banks, what happens to the water? The water spreads out, it loses its power, its momentum, it becomes nothing. Maybe it becomes a lake, maybe it just dissipates out and becomes a dead river. But if the banks are too narrow or too rigid, then the water can't flow naturally either. It might overflow. And if you use this analogy, I want you to think about your kids like rivers. They need structure and boundaries to channel their energy. But those boundaries, they need to be flexible. They need to be flexible enough for natural growth and development. So in Connect Method Parenting, we talk about the importance of taking responsibility, of cleaning up your side of the street, owning your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, rather than trying to control someone else. And this is essential if we're going to become the compassionate alpha. If we're going to go into the middle way, we need to be confident. We need to be the most emotionally mature person in the room. We need to be able to tolerate the behaviors of others, the emotions of others. We need to tolerate our own behaviors, our own emotions. And the first step to showing up like this, which is also, by the way, the first strategy in Connect Method Parenting, is understand your own behavior so you can leave room for your kids. I say theirs, this is typically how I say it, meaning you are showing up in a way that allows you to stay regulated, to stay calm, to stay confident no matter what your kids are doing. And we do this by asking ourselves some questions. Like, what am I making this behavior mean? And if it's not serving us, if it's not helpful, if I'm making it mean they're defiant, they're rude, then I want to look at that and say, is that going to help me show up as the compassionate alpha? Is that going to help me stay in a place that, or create the kind of environment for my kids where they can thrive? Another great question is, how am I contributing to this dynamic or this situation? Is there anything I'm doing that's making it worse, that's making it better? And then what emotions am I experiencing and how are they influencing the way I'm reacting or responding to my child? So for example, if your child refuses to clean their room, you might be thinking they're lazy, they don't respect me, they don't respect our rules. And if you're thinking thoughts like this, it's going to create frustration, it's going to create anger, it might create irritation or annoyance. And then those emotions are going to fuel your actions. But if you shifted your thinking to, my child is struggling with something right now, they're overwhelmed, this is developmentally normal, that is going to change your emotional response to their behavior. It's going to change your actions. Even if you do the same thing, you still set the limit, or you go and support them through their emotions they're having, it's going to feel so different because it's going to be fueled by a different emotion. So setting a limit from a place of frustration versus setting a limit from a place of compassion and firmness is going to feel very differently. I remember when I was working with a mom who was at her wit's end with her 7-year-old son. He would throw these massive tantrums whenever it was time to do homework. And she was interpreting his behavior as defiant and disrespectful. That's what she said. He's defiant, he's disrespectful, I feel angry and frustrated, and I don't know what to do. So we started working on shifting her perspective. So instead of seeing his behavior as defiance, we started to question that and say, what if we saw it as struggling? What if we saw it as him, something not working for him? Maybe it was too difficult for him. Maybe it was, after this long day of school, maybe he was just tired. And that shift in perspective allowed her to approach the situation with more compassion. And the stronger the compassion got, the less the frustration got. And instead of demanding that he did his homework or else, XYZ, you don't get to watch TV or you don't get a snack or whatever, she started connecting with him first because she was assuming positive intent. She was giving him the benefit of the doubt, not to let him off the hook, but to help her help him. So she might, say something like, I can see you're having a hard time with your homework today. What's going on? Or just sit by him, not say anything. Just come over, sit with him, say, hey, do you need a snack? Do you want a break? Do you want to go do something? She was solving the situation by looking at the root of it, not the behavior. She was going to the root. In psychology, they have this fancy name called antecedent, which is where you go to the beginning to decide what's going on, to solve the problem. And this simple shift in her approach, it totally began a chain reaction of something so new in their relationship. And you know what she eventually discovered is one day when he was struggling so hard with his math problems, he let her know that he felt like he wasn't able to understand. He felt he wasn't good enough. He wasn't smart enough. And together, they were able to find a solution. And that's what cleaning up your side of the street looks like. That's what it looks like when you do strategy 1 and you understand your own behavior so you can leave room for theirs. It begins a shift, a huge shift in the way you're able to help your child navigate things and help you navigate things. It's not about letting your child off the hook. It's not about having or not having rules or structure. It's about approaching the situation from a place of understanding rather than judgment. And if anything, you get to hold more firm to your rules and to your structure because you're not getting triggered every time they push back. And because that isn't happening, you're able to stay more regulated. You're able to problem solve, and you're able to have fun with them and serve them and help them thrive. And here's the beautiful thing. When we clean up our side of the street, we often find that the other person's behavior begins to change naturally too. Their side starts cleaning up too. Not because we've controlled or manipulated or told them they've got to or else, but because we've created the conditions for connection and for growth. And when we stay more regulated, they're able to stay more regulated and they feel safe. Now, I want to clarify something important because this always comes up. This idea of accepting your child's behavior means you're saying, behavior, continue forever. Keep going. But accepting your child's behavior doesn't mean that you are wanting the behavior to continue forever. This is a distinction I make in my book. Accepting, you all, is not the same as condoning. Let's say it together. Accepting is not the same as condoning. Accepting means honoring where your child's at in that moment without thinking things should be different or could be different. It means that you are believing the best of your child and creating trust and connection. Condoning, on the other hand, means approving or encouraging the behavior. So accepting your child's current behavior while setting limits and guiding them towards better choices is the sweet spot. It's so powerful and it feels really good. Dr. Gordon Neufeld, whose work has so greatly influenced my approach, he talks about how relationship is the context in which children were meant to be raised. When we're focusing on controlling behavior rather than nurturing connection, we undermine the very foundation that enables growth. So we've got to focus on nurturing connection, not on controlling behavior. Let me give you an example so you can see the difference. So I want you to imagine that your child's having a meltdown. Let's say it's because you've told them they can't have ice cream before dinner. This may have happened to me many times when my kids were little. They'd ask for ice cream or cookie or treat, something 10 minutes before dinner, and I would have to say no. So accepting their behavior would look like this. Hey, I can see you're disappointed, bud, but we're not going to have ice cream right now. And it's okay that you're upset. You typically throw a tantrum right now, so it's fine. You can totally throw a tantrum if you want to. I get it. But it's coming from this place. All those words I just said are coming from this acknowledgement of their feelings and honoring them. I'm not mocking them. I'm not being sarcastic. I truly am honoring their experience of their disappointment and their frustration and saying, hey, I know you're upset. It makes total sense. I'm trying to have so much compassion, so much understanding. And when we can come from that place, it's going to create deep connection. But accepting didn't mean that I was going to give them ice cream or that I was, saying, yes, I love the actually, I'm going to say this. You might have some thoughts about this, but I don't actually mind the meltdown. I know that the meltdown allows them to move the emotions, and I'm all for moving emotions because better out than in. But it doesn't mean I'm, stoking the meltdown. I'm saying, yes, have a meltdown. I want to see you suffer. It's not about that at all. I am okay if you have a meltdown. I'm okay if you have emotions about this. It's totally fine. So you're simply accepting where they are in that moment. Where if you go to what people think accepting is, which is what I would call condoning, that would look a lot more like passivity. So giving them the ice cream, not wanting them to be upset, sending the message that I'm afraid of doing anything that might make them uncomfortable because I'm so uncomfortable and they're uncomfortable. And it's a totally different ballgame. I'm going to go on a little tangent here quickly, but we've been bringing it up, compassionate alpha, throughout our conversation already. So I just want to make another little point about it is that when we go passive, we're not creating an environment where our children can be dependent on us. because we're coming across as unsure, we're coming across as lacking confidence and not knowing what we're doing. And that's the opposite of what our children need from us. They need us to be a strong leader. They need us to take the lead, to be the compassionate alpha, to do it in a kind, respectful way, but to provide that safety and security for them. That's one of the very important components of creating an environment where kids can thrive, where their nervous system can relax, where they can get rid of the big emotions and the upset, or just have security, knowing that there's rules and there's structure, and that makes them feel safe. So when we are accepting their behavior, we are creating an environment where we don't get triggered by what they're doing. We can set limits as needed, and their nervous system can relax because we are in the lead, and they can stay in the dependent. And they need to be in the dependent role for their nervous system to do the emotional maturation work. So the key difference, or one of the key differences, is that acceptance focuses on the child's emotions and their experience, and we're fine with it, and we're meeting them where they're at, coming alongside, while condoning is coming from a place of fear. We're changing things because we're avoiding the discomfort. So when we accept our child's emotions and behavior without judgment, we are creating such a safe place for them to process their feelings. And this allows them to have emotional maturity happen spontaneously, because emotional maturity happens spontaneous, but it's not inevitable if the conditions aren't conducive. So we need to be accepting, we need to create safety, we need to have boundaries so that our children can learn from their experiences. So what does this look like in practice? I'm sure you're asking. You're asking yourself, this sounds fantastic. I love it. What does this look like in practice? Well, let's say your child's having the meltdown. We'll go back to the meltdown because of the cookie/ice cream, whatever dessert they wanted before dinner. Their traditional approach might be to send them to timeout or to threaten to take away their privileges if they don't cool it. If they aren't okay with it, you don't get a cookie, and if you throw a fit, you got to go to your room. But with Connect Method Parenting, we're going to take a different approach. And I have this framework I've created called Seen and Heard. And it's a way to respond to challenging behavior while maintaining connection. If you want to learn more about it, it's in I think the third or fourth section, the last section of my book, I believe it's in there. And I think there's even a diagram. You can go look at it and you can follow along. But I'm going to describe it to you through my words and take you through what I call the Seen and Heard sandwich. And the reason I call it a sandwich is because it always starts with C and it always ends with bridge. So those are like your 2 slices of bread, and then you have 5 components that are inside. So let's talk about C, since you always have to start with C. So your child is asked to have a cookie before dinner. You said no. And we're trying to figure out how could we approach this with Seen and Heard. Well, first, I would back it up. So if your child says, hey, Mom, I want a cookie. Let's say they're in the other room and they're shouting at you to have a cookie. Instead of just saying something back, I would try to establish a working relationship with them first to see where they're at. I don't know what they're feeling in the other room. I don't know what happened. Why are they asking me? So connect with them. Either have them come to you or you go to them, but get close enough to look at them in the eyes, see if they'll look at you back, see if they'll respond with a smile or a nod, some indication that they are on the same frequency as you. Otherwise, nothing's going to get through. Nothing's going to get through. And then whatever fallout you have after that, you're going to be a lot less effective because you're not on the same page. So try to connect, try to get that working relationship with them. If you can't, if they're so upset or they're not able to look at you for whatever reason, just realize that everything that comes after this is going to be a lot less effective because you're not able to connect with them initially. And the easiest way for me to think about why we would want to do this is if you went to lunch with a friend and the friend is sitting across the table from you and she won't look at you. In fact, she turns her back on you. She's avoiding eye contact. She's not responding to anything you're saying. You would just instantly think, wow, something is up. We are not communicating. We're not on the same page. We don't have a working relationship. You probably would do something about trying to establish a working relationship before you just started spilling your guts about something or asking them for advice about something. You'd want to establish a working relationship first. So it intuitively comes to us with relationships with other adults, but with our kids, sometimes we just bulldoze through it. We think we don't need to establish a working relationship, but what we do. Now, I will say if there's somebody getting hurt, there's something dangerous, you will probably have to step beyond that very quickly, if not just bypass it to make sure everyone's safe. So I'm not saying, hey, if you can't establish a working relationship, don't make sure everyone's safe. What I am saying is that if at all possible, try to establish a working relationship. So if your child just asks for a cookie, chances are no one's being threatened by that. So if you can, try to establish that working relationship. Now let's assume you established it. Then you might need to set that limit with them. So they say, can I have a cookie? You say, hey, come in the kitchen. Let's talk for a second. Or you go to them and you establish a working relationship, and you've already decided in your head, we're not going to have cookies before dinner, or I want them to eat their dinner. So you're going to say something, I call this set. This is one of the inner components of the sandwich, one of the inner ingredients. You're going to say, hey, I can't let you have a cookie before dinner. But you're going to do it with so much compassion and understanding, no judgment or frustration. Of course they want a cookie. I mean, who doesn't want a cookie? I want a cookie right now. It was Dollar Cookie Day at one of our favorite places locally here, and there are a few delicious sugar cookies in my fridge right now that, man, I would love to have a bite of right now. So I get it. Cookies are delicious. So of course our kids want them. So you're going to say, hey, I'm going to set this limit. Can't let you have a cookie. Now, oftentimes when we set a limit like this, our kids aren't going to be super happy with us. So they might have a big emotional reaction. And if that's the case, you might decide to do another component of seen and heard, which I call stay. And this is where we're staying with them either physically and or emotionally. Well, always emotionally and then maybe physically. You're going to stay with them, hold space, let them have these big emotions that come up. You're going to support them. You're going to have a lot of acceptance energy towards them when they're upset. And so you might say something, or you might just think this. Sometimes saying is not helpful if they're really emotional, but whether you say or think, you're going to have this thought / words coming out of your mouth, like, it's okay to feel disappointed. I'm here for you. And support them through their big emotional release, which is not a bad thing. If you've worked with me for a while, you know we need to get the emotions out. It's a very, very healthy process. So that might be what you do. You set the limit and you stay. Now you might set the limit and think, I just want to let them get those emotions out by some play. So you could also do play, which is one of the other components of seen and heard. And you can use this playful energy to shift their emotions, to shift their attention. And so you could say like, hey, do you want to go jump on the tramp? Let's do that obstacle course we came up with. Let's do sock war. Let's be cookie monsters for dinner, something like that, and be really playful and see if you can connect. Now you might be thinking, hey, I have a teenager. They're not going to be wanting to be cookie monster for dinner, but you can still be playful with them. You can still say, hey, let's turn on some music. Let's dance. Let's go on a walk. Let's go on a bike ride. Do something with them that's playful. You don't need to double down on no cookie or no treat before dinner. Just go connect with them. So much more I could say about that, but I'm going to stop. But another thing you could say is you could do a redirect. So you have to set that limit because you said no cookie before dinner. And then you could give them something else to focus on by saying, hey, could you come help me set the table? Or could you go take the dog out for a walk? Something like that, and give them something else to focus on. So you'll go through some type of decision tree through seen and heard with the middle components, deciding what's appropriate for them. And then you're going to wrap it up with bridge. So you're going to maintain the relationship with them by reassuring them that the connection with them is strong. And the way we do that is we put the emphasis on the next point of connection. So we don't just say, I love you, although I love those words and say them all day long and all night long. Those are great. But what you need to say is, hey, I can't wait to have dinner with you tonight. Or let's play Uno in a few minutes when I'm done with this thing I'm doing. Put the emphasis on something that you're going to do with them. And this will allow them to feel safe. Like you just had to set a limit, but they're going to feel safe and connected and know that the relationship with you is strong. Seen and heard is magical. It allows you to set necessary limits while honoring your child's feelings and maintaining connection. It's the trifecta of amazing, just influence and impact and connection. It's so powerful. It feels really, really good. So let me share a real life example of how this might work. One of my clients years ago was struggling with her 4-year-old daughter, and it was specifically around bedtime. Bedtime was full of tears and tantrums and what she felt like were hours of delay tactics, which have we all felt that at one point or another? I remember when my kids were also little, because I had 6 and 8 years. So they were just so packed in there tight, and bedtime was a challenge. Now, she had been using a corrective approach. She had threatened to take away story time if her daughter didn't cooperate and go to bed, sticker charts, to go on the positive side for good behavior. And she said occasionally even resorted to yelling because I'd be at my wit's end and I wouldn't know what to do. That's what she told me. And none of it was working. So what she did not like, it was at the end of every day, even if they'd had the most magical day, because bedtime was so challenging, she'd end up feeling frustrated and disconnected. So we worked on a lot of things, but we started working on seen and heard, and applying it was one of the things we started doing. And applying it to bedtime. And instead of focusing on getting her daughter to bed as quickly as possible, she started focusing on connecting first. So she would sit with her daughter for a few minutes before bedtime and play, making sure she had established that working relationship with her, asking her about her day, having so much fun, and putting her agenda of all the things she needed or wanted to do aside and just being there, pausing life and being present with their kids or her one child. And when her daughter started to resist bedtime, she would lean in and try to see and connect with her more and understand where her daughter was at and say, hey, I noticed you're not ready for bed yet. It seems like you have a lot of energy. She might do a little bit more playing. Sometimes she would have to set that limit, like, hey, it's bedtime now. Your body needs sleep. If her daughter had a big emotional reaction, she would be prepared for that. And she would say, hey, in her mind, she would say to herself, hey, I know this is going to be hard, but you got this, right? And she would stay with her as she was disappointed and crying. And sometimes she would use play. So she would transfer into something silly. And if she knew her daughter had a lot of energy, let's hop like bunnies, let's brush your teeth, and we'll get all those sugar bugs away. They'd sing songs. She did lots of different things based on the evening. That's a beautiful thing about Seen and Heard. It's a choose your own adventure path to coming alongside your child and increasing your emotional capacity to handle whatever comes up. And then she'd bridge at the end. She'd say something like, I can't wait to eat breakfast with you in the morning, or I'm going to come check on you in 5 minutes. She'd put the emphasis on the next point of connection. Now, the transformation, it wasn't instant. I wish it was. I wish I had a way for it to be instant, but it's just not how our human brains and bodies work. But over time, bedtime became a connected, peaceful time rather than a battle. And here's the interesting part. The routine became so much more efficient, not because she was forcing compliance, but because her daughter felt so seen and felt so heard and so connected. And this is the power. This is the power of setting limits from connection rather than correction. It works so much better because it's honoring both the needs of the parent for structure, for order, which, by the way, the child needs as well, and the needs of the child to be seen and to be heard and also to have structure. Now, I want to talk to you about something called the traffic circle of frustration. It's a framework that I learned from Dr. Neufeld, and it helps us understand what's happening when our children experience, or us, when we experience, it happens for us too, frustration. So when something isn't working for us or our child, we get frustrated. And this frustration can take 3 paths. It can lead to change, meaning, hey, mom, can I have ice cream? Yeah, you can have ice cream, right? Problem solved. I wanted ice cream. I was getting frustrated. I didn't have ice cream. I asked for ice cream. I got ice cream. Problem solved. That's the first exit. I call it the change exit. The second exit is when the answer is no ice cream, and I get to feel my emotions. I get to encounter futility. I feel sadness, or the child feels sadness, and we become more emotionally resilient, mature. We adapt. It's a really fantastic exit that we all want to take regularly. But sometimes we can't change the situation. We're not ready to adapt, or our child's not ready to adapt. They're not ready to feel their sadness. And so it turns into attacking energy because we're frustrated, and that frustration needs to go somewhere, and we can't solve the problem, and we're not able to process it with sadness. So when your child is acting out, they're often stuck in that third exit. Their frustration, it's turned into this attacking energy because they haven't been able to process the sadness of not getting what they want, and they weren't able to change the situation. And our job as parents isn't to punish the attacking energy, but to help our children move from mad to sad, or frustration to sadness, or resistance to surrender, which allows for adaptation. And so this is why staying with our child through big emotions is so important. It gives them safety, which they need to be able to feel their sadness and adapt. Because if they don't feel safe, their nervous system is going to be in that heightened, activated state. We sometimes call it fight or flight. And if we're in fight or flight, we don't have the luxury of feeling our emotions. We got to survive. So they need to feel safe to feel their emotions. So we need to think about a time where you were really frustrated about something you couldn't change. Maybe you missed an important opportunity. Someone let you down. Now, initially, you might have felt angry. Maybe you wanted to lash out. But eventually, if you were able to process those feelings of disappointment or betrayal or resentment or frustration, whatever they were, you were probably able to eventually feel sadness or feel a surrender to the futility of trying to continue to make things different than they are. This recognition that you can't change what happened and that it's time to adapt. This is the same process our children go through, and they need our help to navigate it. And when we punish the attacking energy, the tantrums, the back talk, the defiance, we actually block their ability to move through this frustration cycle naturally. Instead, we need to create a safe place for them to feel their emotions, to move to sadness, and eventually adapt. And this doesn't mean we let them hit others or hurt others. We set limits on behavior, but it does mean that we have understanding rather than punishment, that we have the ability to tolerate the emotions that come up inside of ourselves without getting activated. And you could say tolerate the behavior and emotions of our kids without making it mean anything negative about them, to just see this is where they're at. What do they need? What do they need right now? What would serve them? What would help them be more of themselves, be more of their loving, kind self? One of the most liberating concepts in Connect Method parenting is understanding what you can and can't control. I think this is one of the most liberating things that I've come across for myself. It can also feel a little sad because sometimes we really want to be in control of other people, but we really aren't. So it's nice to face reality. I have a whole section in my book called Control the Controllables. And I share a list I made one day in that book when I was so frustrated, wanting to control all of these things I had no control over, feeling like I had no control. I was losing my mind. And I want to share with you just a little bit of that list because it was really liberating. It was really freeing to see what I did have control, because I had control over so much more than my brain was telling me I had control over. So some of the things we have control over are our perspective, how we see things, our actions, our words, our thoughts, our plans. We have control over what time we wake up. We have control over how we feel when we wake up. There's so many more things we have control over: who we talk to, who we text. But you cannot control your child's behavior, your child's emotions, or your child's choices, just to name a few. There's a lot of other things we can't control: the weather, the traffic, the opinion of our neighbor. When we focus on controlling what we can control and we accept what we can't control, parenting becomes so much easier, so much less stressful, much more effective. I call this grabbing your rudder. In my book, I share this story about a man. He's on a boat and he sees this other boat coming towards him, and he's shouting and he's waving and he's trying to get the other boat's attention, saying, "Hey, you are about to hit me. You need to change your course." But the other boat doesn't respond. And he's so frustrated. He's like thinking this other boat needs to move. But when the boats collide, he realizes the other boat was empty. So the other boat was never going to change, and he could have changed his course. He did have control over that, but he didn't do anything. And the story always gets me thinking about how often we do this in parenting. We wave, we try to get our child's attention, and we're trying to get them to change course when what we really need to do is to steer our own boat. Now, this doesn't mean we don't guide our children, that we don't have limits and rules. It means we recognize that ultimately they are separate beings with their own thoughts and their own feelings and their own choices. They have agency. They have free will. Our job is to create the conditions for growth and connection, not to control their every move. And even if we wanted to control their every move, we can't. I had a parent whose oldest son was a teenager at the time, and the teenager was going through a phase where he was making choices that this parent was really struggling with: staying out later, breaking curfew, hanging out with friends she was concerned about, letting his grades slip. And her initial instinct was to crack down. Lots of consequences, lots of words of disappointment, lectures. But when she came to me, we started talking about her decision, what she was doing. And she started to realize that her approach was pushing him away. She was losing the impact and the influence she wanted. So instead, we started focusing on what she could control, which at first she felt was nothing. She thought, I can't control anything. But there were things she could control. She could control maintaining her connection with him, modeling the values she wanted to instill, creating a home environment where he felt safe and accepted. She could still have her limits, but she could have control over how she felt about what he was doing, how she was greeting him when he came in the door, the thoughts she had about him. It could be he's making bad choices and he's being disrespectful, or it could be he's struggling right now. I wonder what he needs. How can I serve him? What's going on? And when she began to approach it from a place of connection rather than control, things began to shift, especially for her. And over time, she began to have more influence over him, not because she forced him to make better choices, but because her strong connection influenced him more powerfully than any punishment could have. And it wasn't that he decided to do everything she wanted. That wasn't the case. But things did begin to shift. He did make better choices. And she felt so much better about how she was approaching the whole thing. And it was much more productive. So coming back to our original question that we started this whole podcast with, what should you tolerate in your relationships? The answer isn't about creating a list of acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior. Instead, it's about making decisions from a clean, connected place so that no matter what comes up for you, you can emotionally tolerate. You can be the most emotionally mature person in the room. And from there, make a decision that would serve the highest good for everyone involved. So here's a framework that I suggest. Step 1, clean up your thinking. Get to a place where you're not reacting from frustration or fear. 2, connect with the other person. Connect with your child. Try to understand their perspective. If you don't want to have a conversation with them, if that wouldn't work, just take time with yourself to have a conversation with yourself to explore what might be going on for them. You don't have to get the right answers to get an emotion that's right, to get the compassion, to get the empathy, to get the commitment. 3, decide what serves everyone's highest good, not just what you want in the moment, but what do they need? What does your child need? What would help them fulfill their potential? 4, take action from a place of love and understanding, not control or punishment. Now, this is going to apply whether you're deciding to tolerate your child's messy room or their bad grades or their tone. It applies to all of it. So let's pick one. Let's say your child is refusing to do their homework. So first, clean up your thinking. So I want you to notice if you're having thoughts like they're lazy or they'll never succeed if they don't learn discipline now. Those thoughts create frustration and fear for me. I don't know what they create for you, but they're negative emotions, they're judgmental emotions, are going to influence how you respond. So instead, try thoughts like, there's a reason they're resisting homework, or this is one moment in their educational journey, not their entire future. Next, connect with your child. So get curious about what's happening for them. You could think or say to yourself, I noticed they're having a hard time. You could say to your child, hey, I noticed you're having a hard time getting your homework started or doing your homework. Do you need anything? What might be going on? Is there something you're struggling with? Try to find out what's happening for them. Maybe they're finding it too difficult, or maybe they're just so tired after a long day of school. 3, decide what serves everyone's highest good. So your child needs to learn responsibility and the importance of education, but they also need to feel supported and understood. So what approach would honor both them learning responsibility and them feeling supported and understood? That's the question to ask. And what you come up with for that question is going to help inform you what to do next. Because finally, you're going to take action from a place of love and understanding. So this might look like setting a clear expectation that homework needs to be completed, but maybe offering some support and flexibility in how it gets done. So you could say, hey, homework needs to be finished before screen time. Would you rather have a little break before we start homework time? Do you want me to sit with you? Should we set a timer? And problem solving that and working with that and iterating on that so that you can come up with a plan that will help them. This approach is going to honor both your values around what you feel is important about them getting an education and having self-discipline, and your child's need for perhaps autonomy or support or a little downtime. It's not at all about permissive or controlling. It's about finding a connective middle way. I want to share a powerful concept from my book. It's the nothing has gone wrong here concept. So when your child's having a meltdown, when they're refusing to listen, let's say they're making messes all over the place and your brain is spinning up a story, remind yourself nothing's gone wrong. This is part of their developmental journey. They're not trying to be difficult. Their behavior is information. If you're telling yourself something like that, their behavior is information, something's not working for them, then you're going to remember that your job isn't to fix them, but to understand them. If behavior is communication, then your job is to understand the communication, not to shut it down. And when you can accept that your child is doing their best right now, you can accept exactly where they are while still guiding them towards their best selves. You're going to create conditions where they can thrive for true growth, for true connection. And this acceptance, you guys, is so transformational because it shifts the entire approach to parenting. Instead of seeing your child's challenging behaviors as problems to be fixed, you're going to see them as opportunities to understand them. You're going to see them as opportunities for growth, opportunities for deeper connection. It changes everything. It flips everything on its head. I remember I was working with a mom who was struggling with her 12-year-old daughter's emotional outbursts. And every time she got upset, she would tell her to calm down or go to her room or try to behave more properly. And when she came to me, she told me this approach is not working. It's creating a rift between us. And so we started working on her accepting her daughter's emotions without judgment. So instead of sending her away when she was upset, she started staying with her if she would let her stay with her, and offering as much comfort and understanding as she possibly could. She practiced saying things to herself that released her judgment around her daughter's emotions. And sometimes she would even say to her daughter, "Hey, I can see you're really upset right now, and that's okay. It's okay to have big emotions. I'm here for you." She told me at first it felt so counterintuitive. She thought she was going to encourage, enable, escalate the emotional outbursts. But what she found was the complete opposite. When her daughter felt accepted and understood, even when she was at her worst, even in her most difficult moments, her most emotionally activated, escalated moments, when she could come in a way that she could tolerate or even accept, appreciate, have compassion for where her daughter was, her emotion she was feeling, the meltdown, she showed her daughter an example of what it looked like to be emotionally regulated regardless of what was going on around her. And her daughter picked up on the cue, felt so safe, and began to feel more emotionally regulated as well. She learned that her feelings were valid and that she could express them in whatever way they came out, and her mom would be there for her. And eventually she learned to express them in ways that were more productive. This is the power of acceptance. It doesn't mean that we don't have limits. It doesn't mean we don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean we go passive or authoritative. It means we meet them in the middle, in the connective middle, in the compassionate alpha middle. It means we approach those limits from a place of compassion. We set them from a place of compassion, and we meet our child with whatever reaction they have as a result of a limit or a situation in their life that they're going through with understanding and compassion rather than judgment. So let's make this practical with a few examples. Let's say your child refuses to clean their room. Traditional approach, take away their privileges until they clean it. Connect method parenting approach, you see them. So I notice you're having trouble getting started with cleaning. You might set a limit. The room does need to get cleaned today. You offer support. Would you like it if I helped you? Let's say your child talks back disrespectfully. So traditional approach, send them to timeout for being disrespectful, take something away for being disrespectful. Connect method approach, see them, try to establish a relationship, set the limit if you need to, and then stay with them through their emotions that they might have because you set the limit. Let's say your child has a meltdown in public. Traditional approach, threaten consequences if they don't stop. Connect method parenting approach, again, see them. We always start with see. Establish a working relationship. Come alongside their big emotions. Stay with them if you need to. If you're in a public place, I will say you're not going to typically be in a place where they can have a full emotional meltdown. So you might want to do a little play, a little redirect. You might just have to leave where you are. I've had to do that many times where I can tell a child it's not working. And so we'll just leave as quickly as possible. And then I didn't say this for each of them, but all of these scenarios, you would end with a bridge at the end after the emotional release, after they had, calmed down, or if you have to leave for a little bit, bridge by putting the emphasis on the next point of connection. We always end with bridge. Well, we start with C, we always end with bridge, and in the middle, we play around with those other ones. Again, you can go find out more about this in my book, or if you're in Pivot or Mastery, you can go to the, inside the app and find where we talk about that. Come to an office hours call, we can talk about it. So let me share a story about how this works in real life. Years and years ago, I was in Target with one of my little bitties. My last two girls are a year and 5 days apart. So when I would go out with them, it was double trouble. They would feed off each other. So I remember they wanted something I think we were in the checkout aisle. They wanted a little toy in the checkout aisle. And I said no. And they had a complete meltdown, screaming, crying. And I had two of them throwing themselves on the floor. And the woman in front of me actually turned around and said, hey, thanks for giving my child the best lesson in not getting pregnant right now. And I just was mortified. I think she meant it well, but in the moment I was just mortified by the whole thing. So I put them both in my arms, picked them up. They were just tiny at the time, a couple of years old, 2, 3, 4. So I picked them up and we went out to the car and I let them have their emotions. And it wasn't what I would call perfect or smooth. I mean, I'm sure there were people in the store that were judging me for not controlling my child faster or for letting them throw a fit. Lots of people had lots of thoughts, I'm sure. But what mattered was that my two little girls felt seen and heard. And I couldn't do that in a checkout in Target. And so I abandoned my cart, I left, and the connection remained intact. I share this not because I always was able to get this right, but what mattered was that my two little girls felt seen and heard, even in their most challenging and difficult moments, and that our connection remained intact. It's not about having perfectly behaved kids. It's about maintaining the connection through the challenges to the best of our ability, which ultimately leads to more connection, more emotional regulation. So here's another example from a parent I worked with. Her 8-year-old son was refusing to do his chores, and he really didn't like laundry for some reason. Laundry was always something he would take up to his room, and it never got put away. He would whine about it, complain about it. He just didn't like it. And she tried sticker charts. That worked for a little while, but then he wasn't interested in earning stickers anymore. And she tried taking away privileges, but that wasn't working. He seemed to prefer losing privileges than doing the laundry, doing his chores. So we worked on implementing a Connect Method parenting approach. And first, she was a little bit worried that it would work. She was nervous at first, which I get, because sometimes our brain just can't go to the place where we believe that connection is stronger than correction. But she went with me on it. So first she started connecting with him before making any requests. So she would spend 10 minutes just playing with him, making eye contact, reconnecting, doing whatever he was doing. If he was playing Legos, she played Legos. If he was making a fort, she made a fort or colored with him, whatever. And then after they'd spent some good time together and they'd reestablished a connection, she would give him a direction. She would say, well, instead of saying, go put the laundry away now or you won't get your sticker, she would say, hey, it's time to put away laundry. You want to race to see who can do it faster? Or would you prefer to do it while we listen to some songs? She would offer some playful things, making it a race, putting it to music, seeing if she could get him to come alongside her and to make it easier, to set him up for success. She gave him choices within the limits, within the structure, that laundry still needed to be put away. And when he resisted, she started getting curious instead of frustrated. So she'd ask herself, I wonder what's going on. Or I noticed that he doesn't really like putting away the laundry. I wonder what's hard for him. And so after she did this for a while, she eventually figured out that he was nervous about getting the shirts put away right. And when she understood this, that he was worried about doing it the right way, they were able to come up with a solution. And eventually it became something that was easy for him. This approach of coming in and getting curious, trying to look at what's going on at the root, reconnecting, making things more playful, it maintained their connection, it strengthened the relationship, and it still let her have a clear structure to how she ran her house. And over time, it got easier and easier for both of them. But it wasn't because he was being punished or rewarded or any of that. It was just because he felt seen and understood, and she got to the root of what was going on, and she made it fun. So back to that first question, what should you tolerate in your relationships? Maybe it's less about what you tolerate and more about how you do it. So what if you started with tolerating yourself, your feelings, your reactions, your imperfections? Because when you can sit down with your emotional discomfort, you create the space to respond in a way that feels grounded, it feels aligned. Even if your child isn't thrilled with it, you're able to set that clear limit. Your calm can become your child's compass. And that calm comes from connection. It doesn't come from control. Connection doesn't mean caving. It means being rooted in love while honoring what you want, what you need, what you value, what you've decided are the rules of your house. So I can be compassionate and firm, because being strong in what you want to create doesn't mean you have to be loud. It doesn't mean you have to be authoritative. It doesn't mean you have to be frustrated. It means you're grounded. It means you're firm. When you prioritize relationship over reaction, you create something sturdy, something that bends, but it doesn't break. And relationships that can weather the chaos and come out stronger on the other side are the relationships we want to form with our kids. When you can hold space, you make room for growth. The goal, you all, isn't perfect behavior. It's deep, meaningful connections and relationships that become the soil where natural growth and maturity can take root. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Neufeld is where he says, many people think that discipline is the essence of parenting, but that isn't parenting. Parenting is not telling your child what to do when he or she misbehaves. Parenting is providing the conditions in which a child can realize his or her full human potential. And that's what Connect Method Parenting is all about, creating those conditions. And when you do that, you're not in power struggle mode anymore. You're on the same team. When you stop trying to win the power struggle, you start winning the relationship. And here's the reminder I want to leave you with. You already have everything you need inside of you to create the home you want to create. You just haven't been able to tap into all of it yet. And that's where Connect Method Parenting comes in. It helps you see it so you can live it. Thanks everybody for joining me today. If this resonated, pass it along to a friend who's ready to trade control for connection. And remember, you've got this. And when you forget, let connection remind you. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye, guys. Thanks so much for listening, you all. If you are ready to learn more about Connect Method Parenting, if you've been listening to the podcast and you think, ooh, I'd love to be able to implement this in my life and with my parenting more, then check out Pivot. It's my 8-week program where we deep dive into learning and implementing Connect Method Parenting so that you can take this information and transform your parenting journey. Head over to connectmethodparenting.com to find out when the next group starts.